Call to order the April Finance Committee. Welcome everybody here today. We have a long agenda. I don't know if it'll be lengthy, but it is certainly a long agenda. So we'll start with the consent agenda. Are there any items anyone would want to pull off the consent agenda?
Chair Clark, I move for approval.
Excuse me, John.
I do have a comment. Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than pull C2 through C4, I want to make a comment to the staff that I'm very proud of them for finally bringing to us a series of battery and hybrid electric vehicles. It's been a long time coming, and I'm very pleased to finally see on the agenda these kinds of vehicles showing up for purchase by the city.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you. He's second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda, and we will do that by voice vote. Is that correct? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That is approved. Thank you very much. We will now go to the general agenda. Bear with me. Let me get way over there. We've got, I'm going to pull G1, 2, and 3 together. These were discussed at length at general government, but the city clerk will please read those, please. Read the first one, and then we'll go from there.
G1, resolution authorizing permanent financing for development of 60 units of affordable rental housing for families known as Zachary Point Apartments. And we have Poplar Forest at Old Vineyard and Sage Point Apartments.
Okay. Why don't you give a general, and I think most of the people were at general government yesterday. Why don't you give us an explanation, and it's appropriate for all three of them.
Okay, certainly.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Clark, members of the committee, and other members of council. I'm Tanya Skillman, Assistant Housing Development Director. We have 3 developers approaching us today who are seeking an allocation of home funds as a loan, a low-interest loan, for their 60 units so that they can submit a tax credit, 2024 low-income housing tax credit application.
Yeah, and to a little edification there, they're all applying to the state housing foundation.
That's correct.
One may get it, they all may get it, or nobody may get it.
That's right. May I add that the likelihood, the consensus is the likelihood that all 3 will get it is low.
Yes, very low. They're very, very competitive, and I would say we would be beating the average if one got it. But anyway, the discussion yesterday entailed the fact that I use the analogy of overbooking an airplane. We're giving them all our support, understanding that if they all want it, we got some challenges, but in reality, one may get awarded. So we did direct our city attorney to put appropriate language that explains to everybody that we will fund these contingent upon having the money, and because we're using CBDG or home funds. So Washington's got to appropriate it, we got to get it, and then we've got to do whatever. But I'm supported it yesterday and would support the motions again today. Is any other questions, comments, Ms. Adams?
Yes, Chair Clark, would you like the city attorney to read the language that you
Did you have it with you by chance?
I don't have it with me, but what I've done is to send the language at least to one of the attorneys for one of the developers to see whether or not they believe that in light of the requirements of the Housing Finance Agency, that language would be sufficient. But generally, it makes the approval or appropriation contingent upon the city receiving funds, the funds being available, and council subsequently appropriating the funds for the project. So that's generally what it says, but at the same time, I want to make sure it's sufficient to move the applications forward.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'll have an answer by Monday.
So I think we can assume if we vote in favor that we are approving in concept with the understanding that the city attorney is still working on the fine print, which hopefully you'll have by the, hang on a minute. What day does this go to the council?
15th, so it should be Monday.
So it'd be Monday, okay.
I think it's Monday. Is it Monday?
No.
No. When are you trying to take it to council? First meeting in May?
First
Okay,
meeting.
certainly by then, definitely.
So that gives us more than enough time.
Very good.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Can I get a motion on this?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second to approve, and are we going to vote on this computer-wise?
Is it Brownie?
I see it. It's here. Thank you. Yesterday, my computer was not working. We're working today. Thank y'all very much. That is approval. Now go to G4. Mr. Millett, City Clerk, please read this.
Item G4, approve economic development assistance for Project Olivedale pursuant to NCGS 158-7.1.
Millett, if you please present this to us.
Certainly. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and members of council. When this project was discussed in closed session, we referred to it as Project Olivedale. It did become public last week, and the name of the company is Riddell, Inc. They are a South African-owned company with 500 employees, currently all located in South Africa. They manufacture and distribute electrical and electromechanical components that are used in the heavy vehicle industry. They are looking to launch a new power electronics production facility along the East Coast, which would be the first North American location. They're considering purchasing an existing building that is in the North Ward, 45,000 square feet. The competition is South Carolina and New York. They have requested financial assistance to reduce the cost of opening the new facility. It would create 50 new jobs, a taxable capital investment of over $5 million within the first 5 years. Job types include machine and equipment operators, maintenance technicians, production supervisors, logistics operators, and administrative positions. Staff is recommending a incentive of up to $68,017 in performance-based economic development assistance, which is 50% of the net new property taxes expected over the first 5 years. Financial assistance is also being considered by Forsyth County and the state of North Carolina. If it is approved by the Finance Committee, a public hearing will be held next Monday at the City Council meeting, April 15th. We do have Ellis Kiefer and Calvin McRae with Greater Winston with us today in support of the project.
All righty. Any questions or comments?
And where did you say this building might be?
It might be in the North Ward.
Say it again.
North Ward.
Thank you so much. I don't know where at. I know you probably can't disclose that of the location. No?
It is in the North Ward of the city. Yes, ma'am.
That's close enough.
That's close enough. Okay, that could be way out. Anyway, thank you so much. Thanks to the chamber and all of you guys that always work so diligently. Ken and Pat and Ben and I were at the ribbon cutting of the Greater's new space at Biotech Center, and good things are coming. Good things are coming. With that, I move for approval.
Is there a second? Second. We have a motion and a second. Calvin, I can't see you back there. Is there anything you want to add? You got either one of y'all? Come on up, get on TV.
That's right.
Come on down. Come on down. Price is right.
Never turn down an opportunity to speak.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and members of council. It's great to be with you. We're thrilled that Project Olivedale is considering Winston-Salem, as Ken said, for their first North American location. As he mentioned, this is still a competitive project. It has gone through the county incentive approval process and had public hearing last week, but we're still in consideration for state incentives for the project. They are trying to move quickly. They'd like to be operational by the end of the year. So again, really grateful for your consideration.
Thank you. Tell them that the chair of the Finance Committee, I've been to South Africa. I've been to Kruger National Park. It's very, very nice. Would love to have them come. Thank you.
Great, we'll pass that along.
There's a motion and a second. You should have it on your screen. If everyone will please vote. Edie, your screen?
Oh, am I holding up the process?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
She had an eclipse on her screen.
Yeah. That is 3 in favor, none opposed, 1 abstaining. We will now go to G5. The city clerk will please read this.
Item G5, resolution authorizing an agreement with RATP Dev USA for transit operations and maintenance services for the Winston-Salem Transit Authority.
And I believe you presented something at Public Works today.
Killed it.
Go
Chairman
right
Clark?
ahead, sir.
Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the committee and council, good afternoon. Jeff Ansler, the Director of Transportation. Just wanted to highlight this item. This is the a recommendation from staff to award our next transit service contract to RATP Dev. As Chairman Clark mentioned, we did go into great detail at Public Works, so I'll do my best to highlight those operational elements with maybe a bit longer focus on the financial piece when we get to that back end of the presentation. And we do have our heavy hitters here with the budget office in case there is a budget question that comes out that I cannot answer. I also want to highlight the folks on the screen there, my Assistant Director Kelly and Tia, our financial manager, some really good work in our office, as well as our team here, which you'll meet those folks in just a moment. So just some key stakeholders here in the audience today. So I'll be brief and I'll go through these couple slides. Just a little brief history of the Winston-Salem Transit Authority. Of course, it was founded in 1968. It offers fixed route and paratransit service, but the thing that we're here to discuss today is the fact that we've had a contract since 2010 with the current contractor, which is, as you'll hear me talk about in just a moment, some of the challenges with the FTA compliance is that we haven't gone out for competitive services since then. So about 14 years with several iterations of extensions that kind of raised some red flags. So moving on. We do, as I mentioned, offer fixed route service and our paratransit, TransAid demand response. Here's a summary of our fleet, 45 fixed route buses operating on 31 routes, and about 1,700 bus stops on those routes. And then notice the ridership in 2022, 2023 fiscal year, we had just over 1.5 million riders in that fiscal year. And then on the other side of that coin, the demand response paratransit vehicles, we have about 40 of those cutaway style transportation vehicles. And then that is a door-to-door service, to the door where you may stay or reside, to the door of where your destination. And then we had just over 160,000 riders or passengers in the 2022-23 fiscal year. So what does that mean for FY24? And this is through Q3 there, which is the reason for that kind of fall off there at the end, because we don't have Q4 data just yet. But we are pretty flat and trending pretty consistent throughout the day passenger that we provide. So right now, between 5 and 5,500 passengers per day on the fixed route system, and about 550 to 600 on the paratransit. It is broken down further by weekend should you need to request that information, and we can go into as much detail as you like. But I will say this, the projection for FY24 is an increase over last year. We're looking at about 1.65 million trips or passengers time we close the books at the end of this fiscal year. Just a high-level summary. You've heard me present it at various committees in the past of where we're going with our service standards and our amenity standards. I wanted to show kind of the coverage across the city. These 31 routes cover a good footprint of our city. And then, of course, there are a number of these stops littered throughout these routes that are classified in 3 tiers and based on what amenities they may have at those different stops. So there's a lot of information here and a lot more left unsaid that we can provide. But just want to do a job, our job showing you that we're trying to do a better job mapping some of this, accounting for this, actually adhering to the policies that we've adopted for our amenity standards. So just some kind of documentation of what's going on in that space. Let's talk just briefly about the current contract. I mentioned that we've been in this model since 2010, but a key factor of this service delivery model that we have now is called a management style contract. So the contractor that we have a contract with now is operating a management style contract, which in that model, the responsibility of the incumbent contractor is basically to provide a general manager and to provide the management of operations with their service model, right? And then all the other risk, noticed by my little graphic there, is passed to the city. These are the operating contracts, these are the claims, the insurance, the payroll. Just the staff time to facilitate that alone is tremendous, and then that doesn't account for the bus facilities, procurement, et cetera. So just a high risk, a lot of staff, and there's not a lot of folks wearing these badges that are doing that for this organization. So that's one of the challenges specifically with administering our current model of doing business, is that the fact that it's the heavy lift with a higher risk in this current delivery model. just to highlight what I just talked about, here's just a quick snapshot and not all inclusive of the number of contracts that we deal with. It's everything from bus maintenance, engines, transmissions, to how we do pest control in the facility. So the gamut is large, and you can imagine each one of these it follows our procurement process, which you all know about. Each one of these has staff involvement, solicitation, procurement, FTA compliance, everything, every day, all the time, to just facilitate this number. And one of the benefits of moving to this operations-style contract, which you'll hear our contractor talk a little bit more about, it shifts a lot of this responsibility to them, free staff time up. And I'll talk about that refocus of staff time towards the conclusion of my presentation, but just wanted to highlight some of the lift that staff's currently going. So I'll pause here because there's not a lot of words. This is not a very busy slide, but here's where we've been. This is the entire lift that our team has gone through. And this tremendous effort, everything from city leadership to department heads to the organization wide. I've been here a decade, and there has never been a lift of this specific to WISTA and transit operations that covered this many of our organizational leaders. So kudos, and really wanted to shout out the team behind me and across the organization that puts this together. But I mentioned that there was the fact that we kind of got slapped on the wrist a little bit with how we've been doing business. FTA kind of called us on our triennial of, hey, your oversight and your procurement is not up to par. Okay, and we need to fix that. And that's why we're here. They basically put us on a shot clock to go out for competitive bid. And if you move to the right, we said, okay, I hear you. We like to keep our FTA funds. What do we need to do? And so from that, we partnered with our consultant HDR to go through this kind of timeline highlighted there on the right. At workshop, that's where I mentioned we had a lot of our city staff and our leaders across the organization come together. We had a 2-day workshop with a bunch of really smart people in a room kind of reimagining what transit can be in our city and what the best model is. There's where the decisions were made. Hey, we need to change from a management to an operations contract, and how do we deliver that in our city? You notice just the phrase there, reading room. It would take me 2 days to explain the lift that this was. We went through every vehicle, every software, every part, every piece of equipment, the inventory of everything, staff, you name it. And we compiled all of that data, all the route data, all the fleet data, all the personnel data, operating data, and we compiled it in the reading room. What that allowed us to do was to streamline the data needed for proposers of this scale to have everything to benefit them in putting together a competitive proposal. So that was an amazing lift, and that was really a lift by a lot of folks behind me to make that come to fruition. But it allowed, I think, us to have a streamlined area for potential proposers to go find data they needed to be competitive in their proposal documents. But one thing I also want to mention is the fact that we did a comprehensive look at some peer agencies, and we wanted to go find where this is being done. Transitioning from a management-style contract to an operations-style contract. So with our team from HDR, we actually went to these agencies listed here, Durham, Raleigh, and Phoenix, and this wasn't just a Zoom meeting. We actually got these folks on the call. We just didn't share documents. We nailed them down, and we got some specific questions answered that was led by HDR and our team to actually help us understand industry best practice and how to tailor an operations contract here in Winston-Salem. So I really appreciate those agencies giving their industry best practice and passing their knowledge on to us to help us get it right. Ultimately, that led to the drafting of our RFP document, comprehensive document, which basically transitions us from a management-style contract to an operations contract, full turnkey. And then lastly, I wanted to highlight was in January this year, we did host an open house where we actually invited potential proposers into our space. We pulled the curtain back. We toured our facilities, the garage, the administrative buildings, actually got to look at the fleet, and we had a kind of a classroom workshop session where we basically exposed what we expect from this effort. And we gave chance for potential proposers to come in and really get a firsthand look at what WISTA is all about. So from there, we did receive proposals that were due on March 1st. We'll talk a little bit more about who we were, who we got those from. But basically, we were looking for folks to deliver best in class and return us to full service. You notice that 181,000 revenue hours that we expect. Right now, you may still be aware that we're not. We don't have full night service today, but that 181,000 is indicative of full night service. So we were clear in our solicitation that our expectation for the proposer was to come to Winston-Salem and provide full service. And we want that to be known in our documents, that our expectation is to get us to where we should be. And we made that clear in those solicitations. A couple key contract elements. This is a 5-year term, and through our communications with FTA, we felt comfortable at a 5-year term with a 2-option year. Given the lift that this is and all of the uncertainty with changing contracts with the actual employees and all the different change of hands of contracts, that is a good window of time for a contract of this scale, and FTA certainly blessed that time frame. So we're going to proceed with a 5-year term with a 2-option year, pending those benchmarks are met and how that relationship is developing over that time. And then, of course, it assumes that all FTA guidelines are met through the life of the contract. Real quick, just some of the key qualifications key criteria that we were looking for. Obviously, we're looking for qualifications and experience. We want folks that know how to do this, do it well. And really want to see what personnel, their experience, that the people they would bring to our city and their leadership team had and could apply to our city. One thing that we recognize is that there's still some capacity on our buses. There's no secret there. So their approach to providing services was a big deal to make sure that when they bring services here, they're looking to put seats. They're looking to put people in seats and make our system efficient. And so that was a big part of how we're looking at this, as well as safety. And then lastly, some of the key differentiators was really, and I'll just highlight the transition plan, because that was the main piece for us. We're changing models from a management style agreement to an operation style agreement. We need an agency and a firm and a contractor that understands that and understands how to do it in North Carolina. And so I think one of the things that we looked at comprehensively was who can give us that. And I think that really affected how we scored that. Here's just a quick summary. A lot of words here on the metric. This is basically a 5-weight kind of classification for how we scored these, everything from unacceptable, basically any of those criteria that they just didn't have a good grasp on, all the way through outstanding. And then I'll highlight, here's how it all kind of laid out once we scored these proposals. We did receive 2 competitive proposals from We Drive You and RATP Dev. Both of these companies, and let me just say this, both of these companies are well known. They do this across the state, across the country, and even globally. And I think that these two could provide good service for Winston-Salem. As I mentioned, the transition plan and their key approach to services and staff was really a differentiator for staff to recommend RATP Dev. And I'll highlight that bottom line there. You see the transition kind of line. That transition meant a lot to our staff because we want to make sure that our current staff that operate and maintain our fleet and operate the routes, we want to make sure that we transition those folks the correct way. So that was a key component for our review. Now, I'll pause there because the next few slides, I'll turn it over to our contractor and have them go through, because we wanted them to come in and present to you guys how they plan to deliver service here in Winston-Salem. So I'll pause there and I'll introduce Ibrahima Touré, and he can take it from there.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity to present our proposal and some of the key highlights of our proposal.
What's his name again?
Could you give your name and address for the record?
Yes, I'm Ibrahima Touré. Ibrahima, Ibrahima Toure. Ibrahima Touré, Chief Development Officer for RTP Dev USA. So the slide in front of you is basically our presence in the U.S. We have 36 contracts here in the U.S., but we are a global company. We're present in 16 countries or 5 continents. So it's a large company. We like to say that we think global, but we act local. Here's our presence in North Carolina. This is a very important slide. The stars represent all the transitions that we have done, similar to what you're trying to do here, from a management contract to an operating contract. There are some very complex challenges that goes with that, but the differentiator for us is that we have learned from all of those transitions, and we're able to bring those lessons learned here at Winston-Salem. You can see Greensboro also on the slide. Greensboro was an operating contract transition to an operating contract, so that's the key differentiator there. Our service delivery model is very simple on the slide, but very complex. The way we look at service delivery model is really we have to be hands-on, we have to be visible and collaborative. And how we do this is really through our general manager, who's here with us, Bruce Adams. Bruce is part of the community. He lives in the community. He understands what's needed here. And not only that, Bruce brings both public and private experience to this project. Jeff mentioned transition. So a critical piece of this whole puzzle. Our relationship will start with strong transition. All transitions are challenging. There's not a single transition that's 100%, no issue at all. We're not a perfect company, but what we know is the lesson learned from Raleigh, Durham, Greensboro, other parts of the world or the nation, we're able to transition those over to this transition and make sure we support Steve. Steve is our regional vice president who will be working directly with Bruce as the corporate management team leader. One other thing I wanted to focus on here is not only just the Greensboro, Durham, Wake, and Raleigh transition, but also we will have a dedicated transition manager, and this is a key role. This person brings 42 years of experience from the industry, Ken Fisher, and he's also the person who's done Raleigh, Wake, Durham, all of these transitions for us. So he's learned his lessons. He's been through a lot of transition and has a very detailed plan that we will be able to share with Jeff and the rest of the staff as well. Also, transition is based on transparency. Things will happen. Whenever it happens, we will be transparent. We'll communicate with you. In fact, we will have a system called Monday.com that will have all the tasks, all the executable tasks there that Jeff and the staff will also have access to. So it'll be a very transparent process, and that's what one of the biggest lesson learned for us is be transparent, communicate as much as possible, and also be transparent throughout the process. Here's Ken, the one and only. We always give him a hard time, but Ken is a 42-year veteran of the transit industry. Ken was, in fact, one of the senior managers of this organization. He was a GM, so he brings different perspectives to transition. This is something he enjoys doing. He can't wait to start this transition. He's done 12 transitions nationwide, recently Durham, Wake, Raleigh. In fact, Raleigh just got the vote to get state system, best system of the year. And this just happened after a year and a half working with this client. So we're very excited. We're all celebrating that award for the client. So over 200, checkpoints for Ken to go through. We'll make those available to Jeff as well. And the key thing is really it's not a proprietary system or anything. It's Monday.com, and Jeff will have full access to it. So after we establish basically a strong transition, we need to have a strong staff to run the service. It doesn't end at transition level. With that, we have Bruce, as I mentioned, all the way to Brandy Peterson, our Director of Customer Service and Customer Engagement Director. But also we have Steve and Robert Smith. Robert's role is it's a critical role. This is something that our competitors don't have, client relations role. So when we sign this contract, go through the transition, and then go day by day operation, Steve is the leader of the operation. But we'll have Robert here working with Jeff and the staff to make sure if there are certain things that we need to do better, there's always room for improvement, and we will welcome those feedback. So Robert can work with me and the rest of the leadership team to make those changes. Here's a key pillar of our proposal. We really believe in taking care of our employees. Without the employees, we are not going to be able to do this. And throughout our proposal, we're focused on the employees' needs, how we can establish a good culture, how we can really help them focus on safety, efficiency, good operation. At the end of the day, when you run a safe, reliable service, your customers will come. And we believe strongly that at the end of the day, when we are able to implement this service, your ridership will grow. and the service reliability will be key to that. So if people know the bus is going to come, they will be there. So we really make sure our team is taken care of. So we understand there are people here, this is their livelihood, and we're talking about employees, but they've been here forever. This is all they know. We want to make sure on day one of our startup, what Ken does best that I really like about Ken is with Steve, they just did it in Durham. They'll set up shop. We'll do an open house with the employees. We'll talk through the employees, making sure that they apply for the job. We transition them through, and there are laws that protect employees. Any union member will be, basically, we're required to transition them over to our side. There may be instances where someone cannot pass a drug test or alcohol. Those are outside of our control, and there's not much we can do about those. But our goal is to retain as many employees as possible. And this is actually a good thing for us. If you have to go find someone, train them, it makes it even difficult. Then once we're able to onboard everyone on great transition process, we're now going to focus on continuous improvement. Like I said, we're not a perfect company, but we focus on continuous improvement. We do this through programs, tools, and of course our team. We believe we have a great team. So for example, OptiBus is an operations tool, a software that basically help us manage the drivers, also manage the fleet. As you know, most of the cost, it's in the labor piece. So if you manage the driver properly, more efficiently, the service will be efficient service at the end of the day. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the last item basically is the safety KPI. So the dashboard is really transparency, giving Jeff and the team an ability to monitor us on a day-to-day basis. So they can see a dashboard. If Jeff KPI is KPI 1, I want to see how many people got on the bus. If there is a way to capture the data, then we'll show how many people got on the bus. But we do all of this. We focus on really safe, reliable service. You see Lytx DriveCam. This is a video camera system that is on the bus. We install on day one. So we monitor the service. We help the drivers correct behaviors. And sometimes I started as a driver in this industry about 23 years ago. But I can tell you, having all these tools help the drivers at the end of the day. It's not punitive. It's really to help them get better. So we will bring efficiency, we'll bring transparency, and most of all, it's going to be a safe service that we are shooting for. And finally, when we went through this presentation, and this was the most difficult slide for us to put together because we were trying to capture all of the value-added solutions, program, tools that we put together, but I finally landed here. This is some of the key highlights of our proposal. I'll take the first one. We move people. It's a community engagement program that we take pride of this program because when we come to a community, we want to serve the community, we want to be part of the community. As I mentioned, Bruce is from this community, so these are programs that we go out and work with Habitat of Humanity, or we work with organizations in the community that we can kind of go there and help and really make a difference. So on day one, our marketing director is going to really come in, work with Jeff, the team, trying to understand the stakeholders and put together a campaign. So how we can improve the service, increase the service, and it starts with listening to the customers. And in terms of tools, as we mentioned, we have tools from operations, safety, maintenance, and so on. But the most important thing here that Jeff mentioned also is FTA review. One of the things we do best, and I work for competitors, is the health check review. This is something we do that I don't see any other competitors doing. This is a resource that we have Ken Fisher and Ken Smithson So Ken Smithson his role is to basically come to a location, do a triennial audit. So he'll go through the audit and tell Jeff what he found so that we can quickly clean up those things and correct the issues before the triennial. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for the opportunity to introduce our company.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahima. So I'll briefly try to wrap up, but I want to spend just a moment talking a little bit about the money. And let's talk a little bit about that. So we'll start by taking a look back. And going back to 2019, so this graph right here, I wanted to show kind of where ridership has been, where COVID impact, and where we're headed. Notice that in 2019, to operate WISTA, these are actuals when we closed the books on that fiscal year. We were about 19 or so, a little over $19 million in 2019. We've kind of carried that trend through 2021 into 2022, about $20.5 million to operate that. And then you kind of see in 2023, kind of a turn in the wrong direction where it was about $21.5 million. And then in 2024 projected, our current budget for this year is going to be about, that we projected about $24 million to operate WISTA. You can see kind of how COVID impacted ridership. So it is costing more to put people on the bus with this inflationary period. We were about, 2.7 or so, 2.8 million riders pre-COVID, and we took a hit on the public transit side. But I wanted to show the scale kind of graphed with this axes kind of look, or, showing that compressed like this to show the rebound. Because I mentioned earlier in the presentation that this year we do expect to have ridership growth over last year, and that trend's holding true. We expect to see that continue to move forward even through the transition period. So I wanted to show that with current projection about $24 million. So last thing I mentioned on kind of what that means for operations, though, comparing that to our peer agencies, we wanted to update this slide. You may have seen in the past in previous presentations, but compared to peer agencies in North Carolina, WISTA is the second leanest when in terms of revenue hours. Now, what that means is to operate 31 routes, we're doing so pretty efficiently. The challenge is we've got to figure out better strategies to get more people on those buses that are traveling those same amount of miles, same amount of revenue hours, and make sure that those stops are capturing the people that should be capturing as we were pre-COVID. But just a glance of our peer agencies, we are operating a pretty lean, pretty consistent system compared to our peers. But where are we headed? So this current contract, here's the contract potential. Wanted to kind of lay this out. I mentioned earlier this is a 5-year with a 2-option year contract. The base contract year, FY25, is expected to be almost $28 million. Per the RFP in the contract, there is an escalation for inflation, so you can see the growth over time as we would allow that inflationary increase per the contract for the term. Now, you notice there's a couple incentives and annual allowances. Those are for maintenance, for marketing. There are some clear benchmarks that we put in the contract to make sure that we are providing incentives to provide service efficiently, on time, reliable, and paying for that in the contract to make sure that all things to drive ridership, to make our system efficient. But I'll pause there and say that there is a total contract value should they activate the 2 option years of just north of $218 million for the 7-year term. So that's what's on the agenda for approval today, which is this contract, RITP Dev, not to exceed that number there. So what does that get us? This is what it gets us. It gets us a change from a management to full operations. We talked a lot about the risks that the city has. We talked a lot about the staff burden and the operational challenges that we have currently with delivering, which in staff's opinion, affect our ability to perform. And I think this change frees that up. What does that mean? That means we can refocus. I wanted to highlight what we can refocus on. We can refocus on transit planning. We can plan where we should have benches, where stops need to be, maybe how to get away from a hub and spoke model. We can spend some time developing where our system should be going and not just how to keep the system on the street. And there's a big difference there. FTA compliance, we talked a lot about that, ridership growth, marketing. And then lastly, we've already brought forth, some service and amenity standards. We've already brought forth some code of conduct policies. This allows staff to enforce that, to make tweaks to that, to make sure that we're carrying out the things that we should be carrying out that's already been approved. It allows us opportunity to make sure we're making good on those promises that we've already made. So why? Why? Well, in my creating this, this was an interactive slide that kind of populated bam, bam, bam for dramatic effect. But really, we're getting staff back. We're getting the ability to put the risk where it should be on the contractor. We're allowing us to promote service needs expansion, minimizing the risk, incentivizing performance through the contract. Overall, accountability and service delivery, that's where we're going to focus on this. So there's a lot of information there and a lot left unsaid. And I mentioned there's our budget team is here if there should be any additional financial questions. But I'm happy to take any questions that I can. But that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? I do have one. The TransAid, is that part of this contract or is that separate?
Councilmember Clark, that is part of this contract. It is included in the pricing slide that I had.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Adams has a
Yes.
comment.
Thank you, Mr. Fazler, and everybody, Kelly, and everybody in transportation and DOT. Yeah, I watched you earlier today on Channel 13. I watched the whole meeting, Councilmember McIntyre. I just didn't watch Jeff. But impressive. The energy, the passion, the teamwork. I love it. When Councilmember Taylor and I came on the council in 2009, we were hit with this in 2010, and we were kind of new to all of this. So, we went with the flow because that was what we had, the contract then. But we always knew that we could be better than what we are. It just took us a little time to get there. But I want to tell you and your team and the gentleman and the team that's here, we look forward to working with you in the future, getting more people in the seats, doing some engagement and marketing, that we work as partners. We're not just the owners of the contract. We want to be partners in this because we may be able to come up with some ideas or benchmark some other cities of how we get people in Winston to get on the bus. As stated earlier by Councilmember Scipio in the meeting, buses in most communities have gotten a bad rap, unless, like Councilmember McIntosh, you come from New York, Chicago, Philly, where busing and the L's and all of that is just part of growing up in culture. Here in Winston, because our city has been so divided historically, as Councilmember Scipio talked about the Safe Bus Company, she was right. I rode that bus too all the time. But we've got to take the stigma off that only black people, brown people, and poor people ride the bus. If we're going to attract more people to come to Winston-Salem, transportation, as well as my choo-choo train, is part of the day. We've got to think about how we make it fashionable and hip to ride the bus. But I look forward to it, and I look forward to the updates. I think I asked that to Councilmember McIntosh, Mr. Fazler. He didn't say it, but I think you covered it. The updates. How often will we hear from you on how we're doing with this new process?
Yeah, so I think we've got good commitments from our contractor here to have routine, I think, with leadership from Bruce. I feel like we'll have on demand as needed. We have weekly staff meetings, we'll have weekly reports, and you heard the efforts with the triennial pre-audits that I think will really tell the story of how we're doing.
And for me, being a compliance lead auditor for Johnson Control for a long time, continuous improvement, you've heard me talk about this, some of you. If you're in a business or own any kind of operations and you're not talking CI, continuous improvement, and prevention and corrective action, and when I heard you say today that you're capturing all of the incidents, that was my question about the safety, the numbers, the increase, the decrease. If you're not capturing all the data when it comes to safety, like we did years ago in risk management, then you're really not tracking the performance of how your business is doing or what your employees are doing, because they have to understand that near misses are just as probable as a real incident eventually. So I look forward to seeing the continuous improvement and any corrective and preventive actions that you can bring to us that makes our city better, bus rides better for our customers in our city. I look forward to it.
Mr. McIntosh.
First, I want to reiterate my thanks to staff and our proposal, folks who made proposals for the gargantuan effort that went into coming up with this. And I think one of the big takeaways to this is how expensive it is to let things go for 15 years, 14 years without constantly reviewing and, putting things off. But what we're seeing here is we've gone to market and we now know what it costs. Mm-hmm. Okay, we've had competitive bids, and we know what it takes to run a good transit system. And if we want to have a transit system, we better want to have a good transit system.
Yes.
And that's what we're talking about doing here. And the cost per rider, we can't bend the cost curve. We know what the cost curve is now. We know what things cost. Our job, I think that what we're all looking for is to bring that cost of ridership, dollars per rider, down. That's really where I think we can make an impact. And I think there's lots of things we can do in conjunction with our folks here. So, the end result is a better, faster service for our clients at a relatively fixed cost. We're talking about costs that are not going to change with how many riders are on there. So, the goal really needs to be to improve quality of life for the folks that ride our buses and to increase the spectrum of our city that rides buses. So, thank you for the efforts.
Ms. Scipio.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Fansler, I forgot a question from the previous committee meeting. I've learned something really important that I did not know. In your opening comments, you said that our transit services is for the city of Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. I did not know we were providing service to the county. Can you enlighten me, where is that service?
Yes, Councilmember Scipio, that's largely our paratransit service. So we do have a on-demand service that does exceed into the county. We have an agreement with the county to help subsidize those funds. So there is an element, it is a smaller component of this that does include some county service.
So would our TransAid take customers to the VA hospital in Kernersville? I get asked that, and I just didn't know if we provide that service.
We do.
We do. So, that's great to know, because I know some veterans who are challenged getting there. So if we can get them on TransAid, they can get there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mundy.
Also impressed. Thank you for presenting this. I didn't hear a specific mention of an app, and some of the calls I've gotten from people who moved to Winston-Salem from another city is like, what do you mean I can't track where the bus is? Is that something that's on the horizon, and is that our intellectual property, or is that intellectual property of this company?
So good question, Councilmember Mundy. I think it's a combination of both. The AVL software that you're currently alluding to is a challenge, currently well aware. The city will retain some licensing for our software, and we'll partner with the vendor to make sure we integrate with their service model and the bus equipment to make sure that the equipment on the bus matches the software that we have and that everything jives. So ultimately, we do expect a model where you as a user knows where the bus is and what time you could expect to see it arriving at the stop.
I think that's one of the best things we can do to increase ridership. I really do.
Absolutely agree.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bear with me a minute. Back to the beginning. Okay, I do need a motion on the resolution.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. If everybody please vote when it comes up. That is approved. Thank you very much. We will now go to the last item, which is G6.
Item G6, resolution authorizing amendments to and assumption of the Truist Stadium lease agreements with DBH Winston-Salem LLC and amendments to the companion amended and restated incentives agreement. Public hearing to be held April 15th, 2024.
Mr. Rao, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tempore Adams, members of City Council. In September of 2021, the council approved new lease agreements with the Winston-Salem Dash to ensure that the club was not impacted by Major League Baseball's contraction of minor league clubs. Those agreements established a new 25-year lease, which runs through 2045. Reduced the annual lease payment by 50%, eliminated the ticket surcharge, reduced the letter of credit requirement from $1.2 million to $900,000, and required the city to comply with baseball facility standards as part of Major League Baseball's Professional Development League rules and regulations. In addition to the modifications to those lease agreements, there's also what we call an amended and restated incentives agreement that also was modified, and it included similar adjustments. Also, it continued the requirement that the owners pay a payment in lieu of taxes of $93,000, eliminated the ticket surcharge of $175,000, and reduced the letter of credit similar to the lease agreements. So those agreements were in place. Last Wednesday, city management was informed that the current or the previous owners of the Winston-Salem Dash sold the team to Diamond Baseball Holdings. A little bit about Diamond Baseball Holdings. They were formed in 2021. They are part of a portfolio company called Silver Lake Technology Management, LLC. It's a global private equity firm. They currently own 2 minor league teams in North Carolina, the Hickory Crawdads and the Down East Ducks, and they own 29 clubs nationwide, so they're very well established. So the item before you today really is to help facilitate the closing of that sale. There are modifications to the lease agreements. Actually, if it's attachment A, there's a little visual that is in the car. Just to kind of help explain what's going on, because these are very complex agreements.
Keep going, it's further down.
Yeah, last page. There
you go.
So you can see there on the diagram, there are 2 lease agreements, and then the amended and restated incentives agreement, and then there's a sublease to the stadium improvements agreement. So the modifications to the lease agreements. One is essentially what's being done here is to consolidate the obligations of the new owner into the lease agreements. So one action would be to amend what's called the Stadium Land and Improvement Lease Agreement to include what's called the cessation of use penalty. Right now in the amended and restated incentives agreement, there's language in there that basically says if the club ceases to play at Truist Stadium, then the owners would have to pay the city $8.5 million. This was considered to be the public stadium investment, some of our upfront incentives when we became involved with the construction of the stadium. So that would move that penalty, that language, out of the amended and restated incentives agreement into the stadium land and improvements lease. Also, it would keep the requirements for the payment in lieu of taxes and the letter of credit requirements in that stadium land and improvements lease. It would then assign that lease to the new owners, which the technical name, the legal name is DBH Winston-Salem LLC. In addition to that, the stadium improvement sublease would be assigned to DBH Winston-Salem LLC. So that's a quick overview of what's happening with the lease agreements. Now, in terms of the amendments to the amended and restated incentives agreement, as I noted, the cessation of use penalty would be removed, as well as the pilot and the letter of credit requirements. So again, just moving all those obligations out of the amended and restated incentives agreement was particularly the penalty, and moving it into the lease agreement. So now the owner would be obligated for cessation of use, for the pilot, and for the letter of credit requirements. In addition, there's a technical adjustment to the amended and restated incentives agreement regarding the public park requirement that was included in that agreement. That's being removed because basically that requirement has been satisfied as a condition of a rezoning. The owners agreed to enter into a public access and perpetual maintenance agreement, so the city doesn't own the park, but will have access to it. But the developer will continue to maintain it. So that's a very brief summary. These are very complex agreements. So the resolution before you today captures both of those modifications to those agreements. Because the amended and restated incentives agreement is an economic development agreement, there will need to be a public hearing, and that is scheduled for next Monday, April 15th at 6 o'clock. Be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. McIntosh.
What's the reason why we are moving the cessation clause and the other clauses from one document to the other? And the back to that is, does it diminish or increase our risk?
So currently the cessation of use clause is in the amended and restated incentives agreement. That agreement is still an agreement between the city and the previous owners of the Dash. So as part of trying to consolidate the team's obligations to the city, we're moving it out of the incentives agreement into the lease agreement with the new owner, so that the owner is still responsible if they were to cease playing at the stadium.
Okay, thank you.
Looking at the city attorney, any comments you'd like to make?
Thank you, Chairman Clark. The only thing I was going to add is essentially the city's position is not or will not be negatively impacted by this change because the team was previously a party to the amended and restated incentives agreement, and that team has changed. Basically, those obligations are being moved to the new team, which will basically be a party to all of the leases and not necessarily the amended and restated incentives agreement, but the city's protections are still there.
Kind of like we've added on over time, so you're just kind of consolidating everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I gather we still have an agreement with the previous owners on some of the land development around it?
Well, the amended and restated incentives agreement is related to the development of the land, around the stadium.
Which is not related to the team.
And that includes lots 2 and 3, which we've been in discussions about in terms of the incentives and so forth, as some of you all might remember.
Any other questions, comments? It's complicated, but I trust our city attorney has gotten all the T's crossed correctly and
working hard at it.
Very good. And also, I'm fairly optimistic here. I think the folks taking it over are very dedicated. Mm-hmm. They own 40 or 50 teams, whatever it is, and I think we're going to see some improvements.
Correct.
29 teams.
The operations,
nationwide.
29.
I move for approval.
We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion, a second, to approve item G6. And that is approved. Thank you very much. And I believe that's the last item in front of us today. Anything else from staff? Yes, Ms. Scipio.
I believe tonight is the opening night for baseball here.
It is. And the city manager's working on the rain right now to get it going.
Yeah, he is.
All righty. Thank y'all all very much. Remember, we're under the new schedule. What goes through committees goes to the meeting the first of the month, and what next week will be zoning and things of that sort.
With a few exceptions.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
There are always exceptions.
What's that? There's always exceptions.
Yeah, like the ED items are going straight Monday.
Okay, thank y'all. We're adjourned.